This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Hello everyone, today we are talking about some of my most transformational DIY projects that I think you need to try in 2026. Since these projects were of course very tailored to my creative challenges in this home as a renter, I'm also going to share with you some creative ways of how you could adapt my ideas for your own home, in hopes that it'll help you address some of the design challenges that you're currently working with. These are really small things that are easy to overlook, but subconsciously kind of make you feel like something's off about your space. And if you're renting like I am, you of course cannot make any big structural changes or purchase a lot of elaborate finishes to improve these areas. So I wanted to highlight a few ideas that could help you customize these off-putting areas and make them a little bit more intentional and interesting. I originally got this bookcase on Facebook Marketplace for my office when I first made it over, and it was great for organization, but it always kind of felt a little bit off or incomplete or weird. And I finally figured it out. It was the fact that there was no backing on the back side of this bookshelf. You could just see the wall right through it, even inside the cabinets. It just made it feel a little bit flimsy and cheap. And there was also this giant opening that kind of felt like wasted space. So I picked up some tempered hardboard and cut it down to the size of the back of the bookcase, and then used this burlwood contact paper to cover it up. I thought about getting some real wood veneer, but this was a much cheaper option. And I think bookcases that have backings just feel a little bit more built in and substantial. I just attached this with a brad nailer. And then I also picked up this piece of MDF shelving that was literally the same exact size and shape that I needed to replicate the shelf above it. I just had to cut it down to length. But because it was white, I also covered it up in some wood contact paper. I picked this up from the Dollar Tree years ago and I never ended up using it, but it looked exactly like the bookcase. So I just covered it up in a layer of this contact paper and then used some construction screws and drilled it right into the bookcase. It literally looks super seamless, and you would never guess that this is just an MDF shelf with some contact paper on it. I also think the burlwood adds a really cool vintage vibe in the back, and this gave me a lot more storage for books and boxes and other things that I need to store in the office. So if you've got a piece of furniture that's making you feel a little bit uncomfortable or it doesn't feel substantial enough, try to fill the gaps or unused areas in a way that improves the function, and also find a way to embellish it so that it looks a bit more personalized. So in my galley kitchen, the first thing you see is this giant stacked laundry machine and the water heater, and I really wish that the refrigerator was at the end of the hallway, because to me that would make more logical sense. But because I'm just renting and I can't move around these big appliances, my solution was to put up a Japanese Norin curtain. I needed this area to be easily accessible many times a day, so I didn't want anything excessive or frilly or too long that might get in the way of dirty hands or anything else that we're carrying in and out. These curtains are traditionally 3/4 length down the door frame. They easily delineate spaces, they look very simple and minimal, and they're very easy to walk through. So I ordered a bunch of different pre-sized curtains on Amazon. These are so affordable because they're quite small compared to a traditional curtain or drape. And I tried out different textures and colors and finally landed on this linen oatmeal one. And each of these curtains came with 2 panels, but I only needed one to create that Norin look. So in order to make this look convincing like a real Norin curtain, it has to fit very tightly within the door frame. So I made sure to triple measure the opening and then calculated the middle of that door frame, and then drew a line carefully down the middle of my curtain panel and used some fabric scissors to cut it up. You really want to find the exact middle, even if it's a 1/16 of an inch, because you want it to fit super snugly within the door frame. So all I had to do was lay out this curtain panel on a big table, mark where the center of the door frame was. I also added about a 1/2 inch on the sides that would require a hem so that it would look really clean. And instead of using a sewing machine, I just used some stitch witchery tape and an iron, and made sure to just check every so many inches that I was keeping it straight. And this was pretty easy, so this is a great hack if you don't know how to sew or you don't have a sewing machine. So once I made 2 panels of these, I just put them on a tension rod, and I thought it looked so good. The bottom of the laundry machine could be a refrigerator now, which doesn't bother me, and I feel like there's just a lot less visual clutter. If you want to try this out at home, I will link these products down in the description below. I also will link down the other pre-sized curtains that I tried out, as I thought that they were all really nice quality and super affordable. had this random space off the left of my kitchen and I wanted to turn it into this little cute breakfast nook and coffee bar area. So I went through a 3-phase makeover and was constantly trying to also make updates by bringing in different decor, like swapping out the table and potentially looking for a different tabletop to make the area feel super unique. But there was always something that felt a little bit off in this room. When I originally brought in this thrifted cabinet, I knew that I wanted to change the color and look to feel a little bit more modern in general, as I felt like it kind of had this contemporary farmhouse look. So I painted it with this really durable furniture and cabinet paint so that I could use it really often for making coffee and using the toaster and not chip it and still clean it on a day-to-day basis. But there was always something about this cabinet that just felt a little bit off. And I think that's because I took so much time and attention and intentionality to create this built-in bench for this room so that it really felt part of the home. And this cabinet just kind of felt like a flipped piece of furniture. So I really wanted to add a countertop on it to try to make it feel a little bit more built in. And one day I was taking a walk in my neighborhood and went down this alleyway and found this free butcher block countertop sitting next to the trash cans. So I just cut it down with my brother-in-law, and then once I added it on top, I felt like it completely changed the entire vibe of the room. The piece felt a lot more weighted. It really brought the color of the flooring in the dining room and the living room into the breakfast nook, considering the breakfast nook and kitchen have this like lighter colored engineered wood flooring. And it was just a lot easier to clean because it was meant to be a countertop. So I wanted to highlight this because if you have a piece of furniture that you feel is just looking a little bit flimsy or lightweight, you can always search for offcuts or remnants at a stone yard. So many people on Facebook Marketplace are reselling these things for fairly affordable, or in my case, they're putting them out in the alleyway to be trashed and recycled. I think this is such an easy way to create a custom, built-in, and bespoke look. In this next category, I want to show you how easy it can be to add really unique statement architectural features in a home, even if you're living on a budget. These additions totally up the vibe and character of any old home, especially for those of us who rent and can't change the architecture, or we live in a space that doesn't have any character or detail, or better yet, those of us who live in these really old homes that have been renovated like 12 different times by 7 different people over the last 40 years, and none of it matches. So I'm going to show you a few hopefully convincing ways to present a really authentic and cool architectural detail without renovating or spending tons of money. So wainscoting or beadboard can actually cost quite a lot when you're using real wood from the hardware store. And I was helping my friend Annie, who just purchased a home right after it had been flipped into this gray and white box with absolutely no character. So she tasked me with bringing in some more wood and texture and mid-century vibes and overall architectural interest. And after realizing it was going to cost a little over $1,000 just to do one wall of some wood wainscoting, I purchased one of my favorite products, which is this bamboo pole wrap that you can get on Amazon for only $100 for 8 feet of it. The best part about this is it's really lightweight, so it's easy to put up on the wall or anywhere else, and it accepts stains really well. You might remember that I used this in my sister-in-law's bathroom to cover up the plumbing underneath her sink, and I also used it on the medicine cabinet in my bathroom to give it some more character. So we use the light switch by the door that opens into the room and the window as a height limitation, and it was actually the same size as her headboard. And I really like the idea of having a low eye line in a bedroom. I think it makes a more relaxing space. So I think this worked out perfectly, especially since I could stain it a color that was really close to her current headboard. So I took all 4 rolls outside and stained them one by one and had them dry on the asphalt. And I used the honey stain by Minwax, as I think it gives it kind of like a nice teak look. And then once they were dry, I rolled them up with some painter's tape so they didn't fray when I cut them with the saw. I was able to put these up on the wall with just a simple brad nail, and then I filled those holes with some wood filler because the bamboo wainscoting is so light, you really don't need anything else. And to finish off the look, to give it more of that architectural detail, I did add a little piece of affordable trim on top and gave it a nice beveled edge in the corner so it looked really clean. And I stained it the same color, and I think this added so much history and story and character to her room. So if you've got a basic builder-grade gray and white room with no architectural detail or style, you can bring in a lot of warmth and color and texture by using some wood. And by using a material like bamboo pole wrap, you can get that architectural detail without spending a fortune, especially if you're working with a decent amount of square footage. So I live in a 1929 Spanish Revival home, and there's this tiny guest bathroom in my office that looks like it was added on much later because it feels more modern and builder grade, and it's just so tiny and basic and white. And in no way did it feel cohesive with the rest of the home or our primary bathroom that's got some original pink and black tile. So instead of just adding wallpaper in here and taking creative freedom with it, which is totally okay, I really wanted to try to what I'm calling period correct the home. I wanted to bring this bathroom into the 1920s or the 1950s and match it to our primary bathroom. So I looked forever for peel and stick tiles that actually had a matte finish to give them more of a realistic look. But I also needed to find something that was a square shape and that was the right size, because my plan was to mimic the pink and black primary bathroom by bringing tiles halfway up the wall with some black trim so that both bathrooms would feel very cohesive and related. So I finally came across these square tiles that had a matte finish, and they were also blue, which was really pretty, and pastel like the pink ones in the primary bathroom. So I just used some contact paper on the wall to save the drywall just in case the landlord wants these removed in the future. And this honestly took forever, but it was so worth it. I ended up using this contour tool to go around the sink pretty seamlessly, which really helped with this tedious job. Then I came across this paintable peel and stick trim, and I painted it with some black spray paint to mimic the black trim in the pink bathroom, and it looked really good and was super easy to cut. Once that was done, it was looking so good, but I did have some leftover tiles, so I decided to add them on the underside of the arch to make it feel a little bit more authentic and custom. Once I finished this entire bathroom felt so much better, and it had this really antique and chic vibe to it, and I felt like it really was fitting in with the style of the home. It was similar to the pink bathroom, and it also was matching the office that it was connected to. And I think that's because I took the time to find peel and stick materials that felt really realistic and authentic to the style of the home. So I wanted to share this because if you're ever feeling like you have a room that doesn't match or feels out of place, look to the other parts of your home or even your neighborhood to try to mimic that style and try to build from there. Once you know what you're looking for, there's definitely something out there that will complete the look.
You know, I've done so many DIY projects since starting this YouTube channel, but one of the biggest DIY projects I've taken on recently is creating a home base for all of my design work. So while we're here, I want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for building your own website. I started this project because I realized that I wanted one main hub for all things LK. So I finally started a Living with LK website on Squarespace because I was definitely not trying to add web designer to my long list of hobbies. Clearly, I'm a very visual person, and thankfully Squarespace made the entire process so intuitive with zero coding required. All of their templates are super design forward and really customizable, and their fluid engine drag and drop tools easily let me create this project archive that links directly back to my videos. Additionally, their page layout and link blocks made it super easy for me to add all the things that everyone keeps asking me about, like product links, my Instagram, a way to get a hold of me, and even the Living Like LK form. So head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/livingwithlk to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using code livingwithlk. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video and helping me make my portfolio of design work look and feel a lot more official. Okay, let's get back into the DIYs. In this next category, I'm going to cover a few different functional DIYs that tackle clutter and disorganization. These are pretty easy to do and quite affordable and literally so versatile because you can do them in just about any space, whether it's indoor or outdoor. You can also change these up in so many different ways and customize them to your unique style. I chose these ideas specifically because I think they're really going to spark some inspiration for some of your most common problem areas, like clutter from items that you need and use every day to the opposite, which is like the irregular large random items that you can't really get rid of and you have to store away somewhere. So let's get into it.
So I've got this breezeway out in my backyard that's right next to my garage, and I never knew what to do with it until I finally figured out a layout. I eventually figured out I could create this little outdoor faux kitchen with these two outdoor tables I got from IKEA, and I put my little fridge in the corner here to try to create like an L-shaped counter. But as you can see, the top of the fridge and the counters on the IKEA tables aren't on the same height, and so I needed to come up with something to make it all the same height to kind of give that faux built-in outdoor kitchen look. And I was actually planning on throwing this table away. It had been in the breezeway for so long until I realized it was the same size of this gap right above the refrigerator. So I just dismantled the frame of this and had to saw out some screws, considering this thing was not meant to really be taken apart. And I created a little base for it so that it could sit securely on top of the mini fridge. So I used an industrial saw to cut out some of these screws that were not meant to come out. And the ones that were, I reused them to create this little base by screwing them on top of one of the little extra pieces that I cut off of the base of the table. So all I needed was 2 little base pieces so that I could rest this really easily right on top of the mini fridge. And then all I had to do was spray paint it black. I originally tried to paint it this terracotta color that was similar to the breezeway, but the black looks so much nicer. And I really think that this one thing in the breezeway is completely what changed the entire layout and really gave us that convincing outdoor kitchen look. So you might not have an IKEA table or you're not trying to create an outdoor kitchen, but what I wanted to emphasize with this DIY is that you don't need to have a lot of money to have that custom built-in look. You just have to get creative and find a way to use what you already have. So I found a table at the IKEA as is section that I decided to use as my potting table in my breezeway. And as I just mentioned, my breezeway was an absolute nightmare of disorganization. And the reason being is that I had so many different tools that I really needed on a daily basis since I really got into gardening. So I thought a pegboard would be the perfect solution to showcase my tools and allow them to be easily accessible. And design-wise, I could add in some height and some color. So I found the cheapest, biggest piece of plywood that I could attach to the back of my potting table, and I think this was honestly $12. It was super ugly and definitely needed a coat of paint, but it was gonna fit on the back of my potting table perfectly. And I decided to save some money by reusing the 2x6s from my old potato bed as the backing to use that as the connection piece on the potting table because I upgraded to metal corrugated beds. And I was thinking of maybe painting this the same color as the breezeway so that I could have some kind of color cohesion. So the biggest challenge here was to come up with a grid and decide how many pegs I wanted on here and how big of a surface area to work with. So I thought the best way to go about it was to make a border around the edge of the piece of wood, and that would kind of be my no drill zone. And then down below on the very bottom, I was going to add some IKEA storage boxes for little things like garden tags and little like plant ties and things that didn't need to be out on display. So I kept this area of the board open, and this orange taped off area became my live area to create a grid. And then I just had to decide how big of a peg that I wanted. And considering I was going to hang some pretty heavy tools and a wide array of things, I landed on a 1/2 inch size. So I created a grid, which took me about 2 hours to get right. And then I used a Forstner bit that was also a 1/2 inch, and I just drilled straight through, and it created a bunch of these really clean holes. And I picked up some 1/2 inch dowels as well and cut those down to probably about 2 or 3 inches and used some tape so that they didn't fray and I didn't have to do a lot of sanding. I then screwed the 2x6s into the back of the board and stood it up behind the potting table. And after deciding that this was going to definitely work for me and I loved the way it looked, I wanted to add some color. So I just needed to give it a casual sanding so that the paint would adhere. And I picked up this outdoor furniture paint that already had some primer in it. And I've used this on multiple pieces of outdoor furniture, and we've had a lot of different types of weather, lots of rain, cold, and heat, and it has completely stood the test of time. So I'm a huge fan of it. And I color matched it to the color that was already in our breezeway. So I just gave it 2 coats. I originally thought it was going to be too light of a color, but once it dried down, it looked really nice. And then instead of painting the pegs, I didn't want the paint to potentially chip off if I kept moving the pegs around. So I decided to stain them. And the easiest way to go about this was to just dump all of the pegs inside a bunch of stain and let them soak. And then I dried them off and let them dry for a few days. I think the contrast of the paint and the stain really made this pegboard look elevated. And I think you could do something just like this in your office or your kitchen. You could even do this in a garage or a shed. And the beginning of the year is such a great time to get organized and realize what you have. If you're going to use small things, you can use smaller pegs. If you need heavier things, I would do heavier pegs. You could also do a thinner board, and you can buy some metal pegs or find some at the thrift store. Honestly, the options here are endless, and you can make this really chic and personal to you.
I did this same exact video last year where I recapped my top 2024 DIYs. I thought it was really fun and challenging to figure out a way that you guys could apply it to your own home. So if you're looking for some more DIY ideas that you could apply to your own space, then definitely go check out the first version of this that I'm going to link in the description below. And I think I'm probably just going to make this like a yearly tradition because it's really fun to look back and see all the different things that I was able to accomplish and the random things that I was able to come up with based on really interesting constraints.
So we're back in the breezeway, but this DIY is completely applicable to indoor use as well. I had all of these random poles and stakes and pieces of wood that I used to trellis like air plants or tomatoes or cucumbers, and I needed somewhere to put them so it didn't look so messy and ridiculous in this white bucket. So I'm going to show you guys how to make a box, and you can literally make a box out of anything, any kind of wood. You can paint it any color, you can stain it, so just use your imagination. But this is one of the most basic things you can make with a saw, even if you only have a handsaw, and it's one of the first things I learned when it came to woodworking. You just have to come up with a size of box that will probably cover about 3/4 or at least half of what you're storing in it so the thing inside doesn't tip over. So I came up with a custom size for this box that I thought was going to fit all of these stakes and random things and kind of hide them away as well, while also giving me some extra room to grow, as I know I'm going to have more gardening stakes. And I eventually end up using this box to store my battery powered blower and things like that. You can also get creative with the design of this, so you could stack little pieces of wood where there's no gaps, or you could create gaps like I did to kind of create this gated look. You could also use a solid piece of plywood or even a different type of material here. Because this box was going to live outside for me, I made sure to pick up some pressure treated wood that was in the hobby area of the hardware store. These pieces of wood were cheaper because they were actually smaller and created for people who are doing these little hobby projects like making an outdoor box. You can also find scrap wood for free on the side of the road or on Facebook Marketplace, and I had scrap wood left over from projects. So the piece of wood that I used as the bottom of my box was from actually my breakfast nook bench, but I made sure to secure all of these pieces of wood with wood glue and brad nails so that it would be durable over time. And then I also found these random trim pieces in my garage from probably another project I don't remember, and I used the trim pieces to cover up the rough edges of my design just to kind of create my own look here. And because I wanted this to match the breezeway a bit, I used that same outdoor paint that I used on the pegboard to create some more cohesion with it, as it's going to sit right next to it. And then I used more scrap wood with this. So when I first started my channel, I flipped an IKEA dresser and I saved the base of it because it was just nice pine wood. And I'm finally finding the use for it to just add a little border on the top of this box to make it look really finished. To be honest, one of the best parts of this project is spending time outdoors and doing something super simple and creative, and this could happen in literally a day.
So in this next category, I'm talking about some really small upgrades because these can oftentimes be our biggest design challenges. Specifically, these projects are really going to help you with house blindness, is what I'm calling it, when you're kind of in a space and you don't see the problem because you're so close to it every day. And then sometimes when you do see it and you finally figure it out, it's a costly change. So I'm going to provide some really easy, affordable ways to go about those things as well. I thought these small ideas were worth mentioning because they were easy to do, they were super affordable, they really elevated the room that they were in, and they also personalized the style of that space. Plus, I think that you could easily replicate them if you're looking for a simple refresh in your home.
So Annie wanted a table to store all of her plants, and she didn't want to ruin the table either, especially when I found this one for only $40 that totally matched her vibe. But my problem was that there was too much warm wood in this corner over here, especially with the wainscoting. And I also didn't want her to ruin the table with her watering plants on it, so I went looking for the most perfect marble contact paper, and I finally came across this one that was really thick and had such a nice design on it. And I decided to just only put it in the middle of the table because I felt like that gave it this inlaid marble look, so the table actually looks like it's authentically made this way. And marble does have a sheen to it, so that just added to the authentic look of this. So my suggestion here is to bring in some more color and texture and materiality because it's going to make your eye bounce around in a good way, and to aim to find peel and stick products that give more of an authentic look and feel. I I've talked about this before, but I wanted to include it again because it's so simple and fun to do. You can find stained glass decals on Amazon. And if you want to add in some more character and style to your windows, this is kind of like a two-for with the architectural detail, but also just like a fun, quick, easy project. All of the pieces on these things are individual, so you can create your own design, and then you can buy these peel and stick caming lines or lead lines so that it actually looks like a real stained glass window. And better yet, if you've done something like this before, your eye kind of sometimes stops seeing it because it just becomes part of the house. So I decided to update my window with a brand new design, and I actually combined a few different stained glass options. So I took the corners from one piece and the center and the corners from another piece and created my own look because I wasn't too stoked with the basic options that were available. So I just wanted to encourage you guys to get creative and see if you can add something interesting to your window, especially if you're trying to obscure the view outside or you just want to add some fun character and style to your room. So if you've got some basic builder grade mirrored closet doors, I'm sorry, I hate those things too. And if they're right next to your bed and you don't want to look at yourself every night, I found a really easy way to disguise these and make them look like custom doors. So I've used this reeded glass film in the past, but I've only used it on windows, something that you can see through. I had never put it on a mirror. And these are so easy to use. You just have to make sure to get the right size roll for whatever project that you're working on. That's what makes it the easiest. And it just goes on with some water and a squeegee, and then you use an X-Acto knife to cut off any of the excess. And what I liked about putting it on a mirror is that it kind of gave this really interesting metal effect, which I think really blended well with Annie's mid-century inspiration for her bedroom. I felt like these had some kind of cool custom architectural look to them. And this whole project, I think, took us 25 minutes in total for 2 doors. The hardest part, I think, was cutting around the little handle though. That might have taken us a little bit longer because I was trying to make it look pretty seamless. But this totally resolved the issue of having to look at yourself in the mirror anytime that you're near the closet. And we just installed a full-length mirror somewhere else in the room so that Annie could still have something to look at her outfits in. But without doing anything else, these doors look so cool and so much better. So oftentimes IKEA furniture is very affordable and readily available on Facebook Marketplace, but oftentimes it looks IKEA. And the hardest part is figuring out what part of it looks IKEA so that you can DIY it into something that looks a little bit more high-end. So I picked up this IKEA Besta unit from Facebook Marketplace so that I could have some additional storage in my office. And I really liked the white lacquered look because I think that's a prominent design style in the mid-century modern era, especially in the 60s and the 70s. I like that kind of space age look, and bringing in some sheen into a room is really helpful. But there was just something about this piece that was not right, and it looked so IKEA. And then I finally realized it was the legs. So I thought about changing out the legs, but I couldn't find anything that would give me that 60s look. So I went to the hardware store and found some trim that I thought maybe could cover up the entire base of it to give it some weight and potentially make it look like an expensive vintage piece. So I found a really interesting looking 4-inch piece of decorative trim, and I just cut it down to size and spray painted it this off-white color, which is I think what really made it look like a more vintage piece. And then I realized that I could use the tension between the floor and the bottom of the Besta unit to hold it in place. So I wouldn't even have to nail it in. So this is absolutely so temporary and was such a quick fix. So I wanted to bring this up because you can easily completely change and elevate the look of a piece of cheap furniture by just adding little embellishments, especially when you can finally realize what it is about that piece of furniture that is just making your room feel off. Art is one of the first things that people suggest when they give you ideas on how to refresh your home. And personally, I think this is a great idea because we walk by the same pieces of art in our home time after time, and we can completely just ignore what we have. And so sometimes we feel like we need to buy brand new things in order to bring in a brand new energy. But as you can see, you can take older pieces and just give them a new life by changing them up a bit. So I went around my home and gathered some supplies and art and frames that I already had and gave them a new life by reframing and matting them. This first one was just a piece of wood from the Dollar Tree, and I bought this as a craft supply a long time ago and never ended up using it, and thought it would be the perfect way to bring in some color and texture and warmth and showcase just a really simple photo. This is much more interesting than using just a basic frame because it's completely different. You're just using a piece of material, and there's a lot of inspiration for this on Pinterest, which is definitely what inspired me to do this project. This is something you can easily make with some scrap wood, or you could pick up something like this from the Dollar Tree, and and you could stain it the color that matches your home, and it adds in some natural texture and just gives your art or photos some brand new life. Secondly, I love collecting art from local artists, and I found this really cool block print and met the artist in person, but I held on to it for a really long time because I wanted to do something special with it, and it just sat in my closet. And I had some peel and stick velvet left over from when I lined my vintage dresser with this because I wanted it to have that like newer elevated feel. And I thought I might as well make a fabric frame out of this, and it was so easy because it was just peel and stick. So I just took the existing mat that was already in a frame that I had and just cut it to fit the mat, and that was it. So you could replicate this even if you don't have peel and stick velvet. You could take some scrap fabric and then some Mod Podge or some spray adhesive, cover a boring white mat that's already in a frame that you have, and give it a really custom look. And I think removing the glass from the frame elevated it even more so that you could really see the texture of the velvet and the block print. This is still in my breakfast nook, and it's one of my favorite pieces in the house. And then anytime you go shopping for a frame at the thrift store or estate sale, you're often picking up something that's really old and beat up. So I restored this really interesting, unique one that I got for I think $12 or $14 at a thrift store. And I made a whole video about how to do framing and matting. I have like 20 different ideas in one video back in March last year, so definitely go check that out, or I'll link it in the description below. But restoring a frame that has nicks and scratches or repainting it or something can give it some brand new life. And if you learn the skill of matting with some specific tools, you can make some really custom looking pieces that add a lot of personality and color into your space. And I think it'll just help you highlight certain areas of your home that maybe you're overlooking or that you don't like. And this is something that you could easily do in a day or a weekend.
The goal here isn't to copy all of my projects, but to start thinking creatively about some of your design challenges, or maybe just to bring in something new and fresh and fun. I hope that you spend some time this year transforming your home and therefore your life in 2026. You know that I'm always saying that small little changes over time can make such a big impact, and you'd really be surprised what you can get done in 12 months. Let me know in the comments what you guys are working on this year. I'd love to hear about all the different 2026 projects that you're hoping to accomplish. If you got something from this video, then definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and check out this video as I know you're really going to enjoy it. Other than that, I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.